So folks, I'm gonna use a ceremonial gavel, AKA my hand. So folks, good evening and happy Thursday. I hope the long weekend and the summer has treated you well. And so this public hearing is called to order at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, September 5th, 2024 at the Community Board 14 District Office located at 810 East 16th Street, Brooklyn. The purpose of this hearing is to hear public testimony with respect to community member recommendations for the city's fiscal year 2026 capital and expense budget. If you would like to comment on the board's budget priorities, you should register time with Patricia Olander or raise your hand. And if you do so, please state clearly for the record your name and if you are a resident of CB14. So we will first hear from District Manager Sean.
Hi, everybody. Welcome on back. I'm just gonna quickly go over the budget process, just to sort of high level. This is the mayor sends out a preliminary budget in January, and then there is a preliminary budget in April, and then by June, the mayor and the city council work together harmoniously to adopt a budget. The process that feeds into the mayor's preliminary budget is that all city agencies, including community boards, we are city agencies, are empowered to make recommendations on the budget from the point of view of their agency. And our point of view is the local level district needs. So our budget priorities and our district needs statements are, go in tandem. The process we undergo to get to that point is this public hearing in early September. And this is to get public input to our budget priorities. We also accomplished this by sending out a survey, and we'll go over the survey in just a bit to get that public input. And then this hearing sort of is technically it's the final chance for the public to make budget priority suggestions, but really, we take those suggestions as a matter of service delivery, and then the budget consultations that I will have with other Brooklyn district managers that will take place this month. So those budget consultations, and I'm going to do this alphabet soup way, so if you have any questions about the agencies, don't hesitate to ask, but I'm going to read them out in acronym form. HRA, DHS, EDC, HPD, DPR, DOHMH, DOB, SBS, ACS, DYCD, NYCHA, DIFTA, Disney, DOT, DEP, FDPD, and DOESCA. I think that's 18 agencies that we'll be meeting with over the course of 3 days. They're always useful conversations. We then will, at our October, or it might, Carl and I were talking, it actually might be because all of our meetings are bumped up a week for the beginning of this year, and November 4th is our November meeting. I think it will be at that meeting that we will most likely have the next public hearing, and that will be to ratify the adoption of the priorities that come out of those budget consultations, a review of last year's budget priorities. And then that is what will be submitted to the city through the Office of Management and Budget and Department of City Planning. Then in the winter, we will get agency responses to those budget requests. And, most of you have seen those before, and you know that they're not always super meaningful. And so then we respond back to their lack of response in a letter of comment. And then that will be it for our role in terms of a body, in terms of our city agency body. But then we can also individually still work with our city council members for things that we feel are not reflected in the preliminary budgets. And that's it. So if there's any questions about that, I'll take them. Otherwise, we can look at what's already come in for the budget requests on the survey. Go to that. Patricia, so these also, I should have said, the survey was sort of designed around the Department of City Planning's platform that we feed our report into. And so that's why I didn't make up these categories or couple them this way. I'm just trying to get the input so that it feeds neatly into the output. So the first group of agencies that we're making requests to are under this healthcare and human services category. And you can see that they're, the services to prevent homelessness, services to people who are unhoused, and mental health, substance misuse, prevention and treatment, all ranked very high. Services to vulnerable adults, that's really just our human service or welfare coordination system is getting support from our community. There are a few other things that were offered. Oh, yeah, there were a couple that fell under the category of other, but they weren't really related to healthcare and human services. So should we go one by one? If anybody has anything to add or questions?
We do have a question. I'm curious, what are the numbers in parentheses here?
Oh, that's the percentage of the respondents to the survey. That was their number one. They ticked that off as the first priority in this group of priorities.
Versus the numbers on the x-axis here?
Number of respondents.
Okay, got it.
But for those, you could choose up to 3, right? On the
Yeah.
okay.
Is that right, Patricia? We had to set up for 3?
Yeah, yeah.
Depends what it is.
Or most of them start to 3, but some people put up, check.
I think the instructions said up to 3.
Yeah.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, but then the platform doesn't stop you.
So the form stop before.
Yeah.
Got it.
Um,
What?
I mean, this squares with what we requested last year. There haven't been any major changes in the district that I think would make our priorities change. There is a hospital, there's a public hearing later on this month about a hospital that wants to expand services there. We have had in the past. Requests pertaining to, our bed to resident ratio. So we could go down one of those paths, or we could just reflect what's in our current district needs and these responses.
Question for clarity around the percentages again. It's whoever is percentage of individuals who chose that response as number one, or just chose that
I
response?
misspoke. It was the number of people who indicated that
As a
as a
priority.
priority at
Got
all.
it, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does reflect too service delivery in this office. We do get calls about landlord tenant issues and people who are at risk of eviction. And then we do get calls rarely, I shouldn't say rarely, not as often from people who are experiencing homelessness, but we certainly get a lot of calls about people who are apparently unhoused. And then too, attending those calls are concerns about behaviors that suggest mental health and substance misuse issues. So it tracks with what we hear.
the number one service requested is for rental assistance or dealing with landlords? That's what you're saying?
In terms of
You guys
service
get-
delivery, I don't know about number one, but a lot of the service delivery requests in this office come from tenants who are having issues. Some of them, the issues are severe enough that they are at risk of eviction. Most of them really are pertinent to HPD more than HRA, but and then a lot of calls around people who seem to be homeless.
Right. So for clarity, how many respondents filled this out?
48. We'd always like to see more, look at a statistical sample. All right, I think then you will see in the next go around, or even before that, we'll start putting the budget priorities together, in more budgetary language. But it looks like the budget priorities will reflect this survey more or less. And then also anything I take away from the meeting with HRAOD and Human Resource Administration, Department of Homeless Services, Department of Social Services, same thing. Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. We'll see what they are asking community boards to support in terms of what they view as their budget priorities in the upcoming fiscal year.
When we speak to the different agencies and we offer, like, for example, these name like services for specific, like, different areas, is that conversation to identify what the service is or just to name that this is like what the community is looking for, and then they kind of identify the services they could provide?
So it depends. Sometimes we know exactly what program we're looking to
Yeah.
support because it's used in this district. We know the community-based organization that drives it and all of that stuff. Other times we say we need, our community has reflected a need for more street outreach. And then they'll say, well, these are the 3 programs we have going on for street outreach. And this is what we're seeking support for. This is the one that's actually grown the most. We're looking to expand that more. We're looking for your support on that particular program. So the naming goes back and forth. And I've been, then should we go on to the next category?
Yes.
Sorry. Youth education and child welfare. After-school programs, early education, early childhood programs, getting big shout outs. And then there's quite a lot there, right, for immigrant youth and family support services. And some workforce development, which I like to see because I think it, what we do the youth conference for in some ways. And then after school and school amenities, I kind of saw that a line between that I want to kind of build into a narrative. But, there was an article, Eric, was actually after I spoke to you, I saw this article pop up about funding for after-school programs being in a bit of trouble, having to do with a new state formula for that funding or a new vehicle through which the funding is going. So I think we ought to keep an eye on that and see if that needs to be iterated somehow in our district needs statement and if it's going to impact our local schools. So if you have your ear to the ground, any of you educators, school people, parents with small children in the system, let us know, because that's of concern, especially given it's such a high priority here. And then I read that, this very day it's in trouble.
Forward that article.
Yes.
See what it is.
Yeah. And the other thing that's been on our budget priorities before is the need for new additional seats in our district. And the Department of Education always responds to that request. It's like, you are recognized as a district in need of seats. And like, well, thank you for the recognition.
Certificate.
Yeah, right. But that's been for a decade. Like, if you've been recognized for a decade, like, what is that? I have to look up the meaning of recognition. So that might be something.
Is that,
Sorry, go ahead.
is that where the school construction authority is involved though, like their 5-year capital plan? Or-
Well, what we spoke about a little bit earlier today is they're phasing in the public schools, the caps on class sizes, once they pass. And so I know this school year, there's 1 grade that has to be capped. So for example, I know at 217, all the first grades are less than 20 kids. And that expanded their number of classrooms needed from 6 to 9. And so now if you multiply that out in 2 years, you'll be at 60% of the grades will be required, and then 3 is full. And so the principal was saying, in 3 years, I absolutely do not have enough classrooms. Like, I know that now. So our
And that's just for the kids who are there right now.
if that number doesn't change and enrollment doesn't go up, like 3 years, absolutely not enough space. And so our art room, is going to be gone and become an art cart. And even with that, it's not going to be enough. And that's just our school. I mean, I know. So.
And with the stats, we're about to head, especially for elementary, we're headed to the year where a lot of kids were born during COVID. So a lot of them will be entering into kindergarten or first grade in the next couple of years.
Storm, yeah.
Yeah,
Contributing to that.
that number.
So were you gonna say something, Steve?
The numbers I've seen say, the city's population is low for 0 to 5, so. I don't know
Right,
if that's
right now,
necessary.
currently. So right now, kindergarten is the lowest it's been in history.
But 0 to under 5 is
Yeah.
low,
Mhm.
so.
And then as the years go up, the kindergarten is gonna actually boom based on where we were. Cause the year before COVID was the lowest birth rate that they had. And then during COVID, it actually spiked.
Regardless, I think school, class size caps in and of itself, and the fact that we've been recognized as a district in need of seats suggests that maybe adding that in the capital needs
Yeah,
would be the useful advocacy.
the state funding for the city is, I think it's $700 million is contingent upon meeting the class size requirements for the whole city. So that's the budget shortfall and need. That's every school in the city. It's not just our school, right? Every school. So, yeah, you'll be hearing about that more.
Okay. Anything else there of note or generating questions? Then we're going to move on to public safety and emergency services. This one on the survey, this one was a little wackadoodle because, you know, there is a spot on the survey where you could kind of, I think it said other, and you could put in your own suggestions. And in most of these categories, we got 2 or 3 suggestions, and mostly they comported with something that was listed, but just in different words. So I didn't think of it as being outstanding or unique. But for this, there were like 10 different things, and some of them were kind of just kind of rude behavior and but it kind of suggested to me that we haven't kind of nailed, or DCP hasn't really nailed what people see as a need in their district. So the survey, I mean, other than that support that we've gotten over the years, pretty consistently for support for the community-based organizations that, you know, provide cure violence and violence disruptors, it's kind of more all over the place. And so I think I might take a little more from service delivery and a little more from the consultations we have with FD and PD, and see what I derive from those conversations. But I mean, honestly, in terms of public safety, the complaints we're getting have to do with traffic calming, kind of cross over into transportation stuff. And then people, the police complaints that we're getting are almost all quality of life things. You know, everybody wants whatever car it is on your block that hasn't moved for X number of days. Everybody wants that car gone.
I've heard that at
And so,
precinct meeting.
yeah,
It's just a long list. Oh, thank you.
it's a long list of cars that people want moved.
It was amazing how heated people got about their particular cars on their block.
I mean, the emails we get about more ghost cars. My block's so haunted. I don't know. But so I kind of want to look into that balance between the quality of life complaints that are going to PV, the stuff that the police department is sort of like, that's been pulled off them and transferred. I mean, one that's kind of my pet peeve. And I know that vendor enforcement has at least 3 sides to a story, and there's lots of different ways to look at it. But to the extent that we have identified places where enforcement is requested and warranted, just no, none, 0 enforcement. The city, it's in the Department of Sanitation. And their plans to offload that from PD to DSNY, it's just a complete failure right now. So to the extent they're going to pivot and bring it up, or to the extent that the city has just said, we're not making vendor enforcement a priority, I'll try to tease that out in budget consultations, but
As far as,
I don't know, what else do we want with public safety?
Number 6.
I was just gonna say, as far as number 6,
Yeah.
first of all, I noticed all of.
They're all
them.
gone.
Isn't that amazing?
They're all
It
gone.
was like 1 week
Mhm.
and half of them are now in disrepair, broken glass on the doors, you know, I mean, that should be taken care of. But yeah, I was astounded how finally.
I'm starting to see that enforcement too. Like there's some that are still, you know, there's some that are still open, but I've definitely seen a market shift.
Oh my goodness,
And
yeah,
they-
it was just like a blitzkrieg,
Yeah.
like a month or so ago. I mean, you saw it too, obviously, all along church, just like they're all gone.
It's all on Flatbush from,
Yeah.
I'll say from Tilden all the way down to Livingston Street.
I'm glad to hear that it expanded because just in my own little corner of the world, I was just shocked.
Mhm.
So I'm thrilled. I mean, they finally, you look suspect.
Well, I just don't understand why it was so hard and then suddenly so easy. It just makes all of the excuses about why it didn't happen before. feel a little
How many
bit-
letters did you send?
I think it was the coordination of agencies between the sheriff and NYPD and then the Office of Cannabis. The Office of Cannabis was like, okay, well, we've got one guy to send out with 5 guys to send out with 2 guys, so.
Mhm.
Simply wanted to point that out, yeah.
So we maybe don't need to stress that as a big need so
Yeah.
much in this
would-
go round.
It would be maintenance of,
Continuation of funding
Yeah.
to support enforcement.
It would, and then the other thing I'm wondering too is just like enforcement starting to happen, and depending where we live in the area, we're starting to see that, but then it's like you have these empty storefronts, right? And so that comes back to an issue that's been raised before, where it's like various committee members feel like there hasn't been support from the city for local businesses, so it's like, okay, enforcement's starting to happen, but now you have these empty lots, so I feel like that puts pressure on, you know, Department of Small Business Services or other ones where it's like these people who operated illegally because the legal process you tried to start didn't work so well. So now
That's your point. So like.
what's happening, right?
Follow-up outreach to the landlord. Right, hey, dude, we know we just did this to you, what can we do to help you patch this up?
Yeah, right. Like anything from, I guess, like you say, the places where you're seeing the broken facade, and also like, hey, for the business owners who, whatever they were trying to do, that wasn't, I guess, illegal cannabis or whatever. It's like, is there a program in place at the state or the city level to support them to try and launch their business? Because these storefronts are starting to be vacated, but now you have these empty eyesores, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like, what's happening?
Okay, I'll raise that as a
Okay.
question with SBS.
yes, and DOB, no? If the building is not secure,
Oh, if it's not secure, yeah.
right, but I mean.
Okay. Heard, I think that's it.
5 is great.
Oh, relocating the precinct house.
I was gonna get to that.
No.
Are we gonna bang that same drum again? What do we want to do with that this year?
Reiterate the request, note that it's been on the list for 35 years. Mhm.
Is that kind of recognition?
Yeah.
I think so.
We are so lucky.
That's a much bigger certificate than the 10-year.
Okay, there is some positive news in that there was a flooding issue at the precinct that, the EP went out and worked on it, and, the last time it rained really badly, I got 3 calls that that the precinct wasn't flooding, like, hey, precinct's fine, like, then leave me alone. No, that's good, that was good news, hopefully that's all they needed. Where are we now?
So we just finished public safety standards. So
Oh, no, I am gonna say one more thing about public safety. In those others, we did get, I think I said, traffic enforcement, we get a lot of requests for that. And we'll put that out on the budget list, but also crossing guards, like there were mixed messages about headcount. But one thing that everybody said is that more crossing guards are needed, and heck, I agree. So that's been in our budget priorities before, but we will, put that out there as well.
Can I offer one thing too, as another expanding truck enforcement? 53
Yeah,
trucks.
traffic enforcement, PTRUCAS, got it. Yeah,
by increase, you mean do it? Because like,
Increase the unit in the department because apparently it's not big enough.
okay, understood.
yeah.
Joanne, is that what I recall? There's only like one division that they like park at one location or a multiple location? And they just stop like every truck?
I've seen it
And-
done.
It's an
yes.
operation, so it's a
Right.
roving
So
operation.
it's not like a normal.
And we don't get it very much because we're not highway connected.
Well, we have a local truck route.
We do, but the operations tend to work in the districts that have exit ramps and on-ramps.
Oh, from the.
That's where they
Cross.
focus.
But we do, well, all right, yeah, 12 does. We feed into it.
Yeah, I mean,
We have legitimate concerns. I mean,
So now next is core infrastructure.
Board member.
Sorry, I just want to ask real quick. I don't know if this would fit in here, just an idea, but something like community trainings for CPR, Narcan, like these kind of preventative trainings. I don't know if that would be something that we would do budget requests or those kind of things. Given we would partner with FDNY doing this to have those at libraries and.
So I can put that up in one of the questions, but I think usually what we have, yeah, it could be there, but also for public safety purposes. I think most of those are funded through their foundations, not through the agency. And frankly, we have gotten them every time we've made a request, so I don't know. So I've heard that two ways, both as a request and as a budget question. Thanks.
I have a comment, it's not related, but finally we got a mid-block crossing,
Uh-huh.
parade ground going into Prospect Park. Finally, there's a crosswalk in the middle.
I think there's a little bit of a shift in DOT's feelings about those, because we used to have to fight tooth and nail to get them, and they said they were not believers in mid-block crossings.
Yeah.
We now have one there. We have one on Coney Island Avenue at the masjid. And those might be the only two, but they came, that one at the parade ground came without even a real hard push for it, like the one on Coney Island was a real hard push over a number of years. And then I read something about, there was an article about what New York City can learn from the streets of Paris, following the Olympics. And one of them is that Paris loves mid-block crossings. So there might be a little bit of a cultural shift in how we do with block crossings. So that one, I think that one was so needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is pedestrian safety handled there? Is there a light or is it a?
Yeah,
there's a
it's
light?
actual crossing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been a little bit worried about some of the pedestrian, the bump outs that they're doing. But they're doing them on a lot of uncontrolled corners. So that was another thing. We never used to be able to get a crosswalk even painted at an intersection unless it was controlled, because they didn't want to encourage people to cross if there wasn't a stop sign and now we're starting to get those neck downs with the crosswalk. So I'm gonna try to understand that.
Maybe we don't ask, and they'll say, oh, it means you don't like it.
Oh, I mean, I do want to ask because I want to be able to explain it when somebody says, why is this? And I also want to know like why we are no longer afraid of luring people into crosswalks that don't have a stop sign in a. Is there an analysis about where those are going?
I feel like one of the behavioral things in the sort of traffic automobile pedestrian relationship is the more the drivers expect pedestrians in the road, the more careful they drive, right? If you think you're walled off, you'll just drive 100 miles an hour. But if there's crosswalks, even visually, there and people around, like people slow down. That's why I'm not just Paris, but other places where they've removed curbs, they find people drive slower because it's sort of like, oh, this is a joint space. So I wonder if that
Yeah.
is part of
For New Yorkers. Respond the same way.
But anyway, the more indications that there's pedestrians around, just anecdotally it feels positive.
That was one of the things about mid-block crossings too, is that there aren't as many distractions there, so all you're seeing really are pedestrians crossing. There's no cars turning right or left. There's just people crossing.
That's what the one on Coney feels like that. It's like, this is a pedestrian corridor. This is not about autos. It's nice.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Are we let's move on. Yeah, so mostly flooding, mostly stuff about water. If you add number 2 and number 3 and number 6 together. I mean, we did ask for it. But there's also, there's also sanitation and, I do, every single day we have a call that we call the garage, or it's after 2 and we send the garage an email. Every single day there's a litter complaint or a sanitation complaint or an illegal drop-off complaint. I mean, and I think, just looking around, I think it looks dirtier out there. So I am very, very worried about sanitation. I really think that the removal of manual litter patrol, now that's been in our budget request for 2 years running because they decimated that during COVID and never returned it. And that's exactly what pardon me, what it sounds like.
Then are those small ones you need at the dead end?
It's just like when they pick up litter, that's manual litter control.
I ran into Councilmember Rita Joseph and she said manual litter patrol has been increased in our district, or she got it back.
No, what she did a very generous thing by giving her green NYC initiative money back to the garages.
Okay.
So yeah, it's back in our district where it overlaps with her district, and it's back, I think Farah Lewis has funded some too, but she also gave a lot of it to 15, 18. So, we share it, and then it can only be, it's kind of feels a little bit unfair that this is a baseline service,
Right.
right? So it should be in the baseline budget. The fact that we are moving money from city budget to council back to the city, every time you move a dollar, you lose some cents on it. So that's silly. Then sometimes it gets put on overtime instead of straight time. So now you're moving money around, losing money while you're moving it and then paying overtime. And it's baseline. I mean, and then we've got, the Department of Sanitation is going to require that business improvement districts containerize litter. It's not the bids litter. So I don't know if they're going to be able to get away with it because the revenue from a bid, from the assessment in a bid, that's supposed to supplement, not supplant city services. And this looks a little bit shady to me. So I don't know if that will go through. But no, I'm just worried about what the impact of not enforcing on vendors has a litter impact. I mean, they're chaining tables to trees and street signs up on Church Avenue. So I'm a little bit concerned about this, and I think our consultation with DSNY will be interesting. I've written to the commissioner saying that the lack of vendor enforcement and the non-existence of MLP is creating conditions in our district that can't be handled with the baseline services being provided. And then they did they did a Hall of Shame program. Did anybody see that?
Yeah, no, like,
So don't remove baseline services from this community and then shame community members for the conditions that result. We shame on them. So I'll see how that goes, but I'm really worried about what the priorities are at sanitation right now. Collection, they're not cleaning on shift. We're doing a lot more 4 to 12 trucks than before. I don't know, got a bunch of brooms that are down right before leaf season. So I think there's gonna probably be more capital requests for sanitation this year than prior years. Heaven forbid it should snow this winter. People would say,
Yeah, just an observation that there are times when the sweepers find was their problems. Because after they've left, it's still a mess. And
So-
why do they go so fast? I think maybe when they go slower, it's cleaner as opposed to when they go faster. I don't know if they're gonna drive behind one or.
yeah, I've seen them all the time, and actually this is like, this is where they all gather during the day. So I talk to them. We talk to them a lot. We got Dave and Ronco, Jimmy.
I got a Catskill bagel.
Yeah, they love cast.
They also
You guys in my hotspot, right?
They also unload their leaves into trucks. Now, part of the problem is that, it's a leafy district and you're supposed to clear from the curb 18 inches in. And so to the extent that people might not do that, the brooms sometimes go over it and pick that stuff up or blow it about. And other times they have to circumnavigate that area because they know it's gonna jam up the broom. And then they have to take time while they're supposed to be driving around sweeping to unclog their machines into the back of a garbage truck that also isn't now collecting garbage because it's pulling leaves out of brooms. So I also think, I also think that it would be helpful if there were more compliance in the community. People moving their cars.
Oh, yes.
I haven't had anybody move a car
I've seen that.
west of Ocean Parkway, and I don't know how long. They've done some special operations to try to clean over there. So it takes I forget what it is, something like 5 feet. If there's a car parked, you have to move out to get around that car, and then you can't move right back in front of the car. So it's maybe some of that, but if you ever see a broom that's going fast or not doing a thing, just call in real time because they know in the garage which person is on that broom and they can ask them. Sometimes there's an explanation. You know, there was a time that somebody got called out for not putting the water on their broom, and then we talked to him and he was like, well, they had just done construction there. And if you put the water on, all of that dirt and sand that's there turns into mud and then it sticks onto the curb and it's worse. So sometimes there's a reason why. Sometimes he's like, I was eating my sandwich and didn't bark.
And it's said that I was driving behind one the other day, but I had to like stay back because it was on Westminster between Albemarle and Beverly. And like literally it was in, out. So many cars did not move. So it was just like in, out, like the guy was just peeping in and out.
Yeah, or it's, the worst thing is if somebody double parks and then somebody else doesn't move, and then it's like too narrow for the room to even get through. It's just like, can we, yeah, but anyway, let me know in real time, Clarence, if you see it around town.
Since DSNY isn't responsible for alternate side of the street enforcement now, did they get any additional funding to actually make that happen? Or are they just working with their baseline budget and the people that they have to do enforcement?
Well, the supervisors can write ASP tickets. The guys from the garage can do that.
Right, but isn't it their responsibility now, like for the most part, and not PD's?
Well, it can only be written, I think, during those ASP hours. So the idea that PD would be driving around looking for ASP to write is not that likely. Sometimes they ask traffic to help them. Maybe I'm not understanding your question.
My question is budgetary. So if DSNY has become more responsible for writing ASP tickets, are they using baseline budget to get their people out there to do that new service at a larger scale?
So I don't know that that is a new service. They've always been responsible for writing those tickets, and I don't know that there's been an offloading of that responsibility from one point to another, but I can, if you're saying you understand that to be true, I can check on that and ask that question.
I just noticed that all of the ASP tickets are given by sanitation and not PD.
That I
And
think
that's
was
more-
usually the case before. Yeah, I don't see that as a change. Traffic would sometimes come through and do it upon request, but it's mostly been the supervisors and, you know, sometimes they don't like writing those. I forget which way it is. I think that not moving your car is less of a ticket than double parking. So they didn't have parity between those two, and they would rather, I don't remember. Let me.
Big
check
ticket
on
items,
that.
use that phrase.
But I could ask about funding, funding enforcement and where that's at and.
But, yeah, I see, more cars, a double, you mean, oh, in regular time, never mind.
Yeah, no, there's more cars double parking for ASP these days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that too. A lot of communities are very vocal about tolerating that in order to get the brooms down. We've never put it out there that that's tolerated because somebody could come along and write a ticket. It's a valid ticket. So I don't want to tell people they can do something, then have them get a ticket, then look like it's our fault. But I have been noticing more of that.
Many communities, yeah.
I'll find out about. The other thing is we're told sometimes when we ask for ASP enforcement, Supervisor Lopez will say he doesn't write them if it's not dirty. He's not gonna write an ASP ticket to write an ASP ticket if it's not dirty on that block. And then people are like, well, if it's the rule and they broke the rule, you should write it either way. He's like, I'm the cleaning supervisor, not the parking supervisor. I write it when we haven't been able to clean. It prevents us from cleaning.
Wish I could use that argument every time I got a ticket.
There's no fire. It's like a stand-up. That's
You know what? I'm gonna use that on Supervisor Lopez.
Oh, man.
Thank you.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It is that great scene in Backdraft. I remember Backdraft, the
Yup.
movie.
Yup.
Here we go. Right through the car. So that one time, Steve, you're gonna get it. You're gonna get it.
And question on that alternate satisfaction cleaning, right? Do we have data on that they go out on those specific days and those times? Cause I know that I've moved my car and then I'll come back and I'm like, oh, nothing was clean. So this was like, what was the point?
Well, there's GPS on those brooms, and if they look at them, and if they see a block was missed, there better be a pretty good explanation as to why. I mean, and that's the other thing is that it seems like these guys are getting written up a lot more than they used to get written up. There's a, so again, bring that to our attention in real time and we'll find out. And if somebody didn't do their job, and they don't have an explanation why they didn't go down there. Sometimes it's that they're like, I couldn't go down because they were double parked and then not moved and I didn't want to get the broom stuck. But if it's not that,
Yeah.
and then usually they have to take a picture so that if their supervisor comes up to them and like, why didn't you go down East 19th Street? Look, boss, this is why. I mean, I really, you all, most of you know this, I have a real soft spot for those guys. I really think they work hard and I have a great deal of respect for the job they do. And I think most of them are not out there to try to not work. But sometimes they are.
No, the reason I asked is for budget reasons, like, do they have enough budget to meet the needs of like the alternate side parking cleaning that's supposed to happen based on the signs? Because I know there's been a few times, I haven't looked recently, but when I used to park definitely on like Westminster, Argyle, Rugby, those blocks, like even when we move my car and then I circle back the next day, it looks exactly how it looked when I pulled out.
Okay, I'll find out. I mean, mostly they say they cover their entire routes and we go back to some streets twice if there wasn't a lot of compliance to see if maybe there's been a sort of shutdown in different cars. But I'll ask them if they're hitting the broom, if the brooms are hitting 100% of the streets or how they're measuring that or what percentage it is or whatever. But again, I know that some brooms have been down. And so there's fewer, because they've been borrowing brooms from other districts. But that doesn't mean that there hasn't been a broom on every route somehow. And then, we are down on supervisors. There used to be, there's like 4 cleaning sections in the district, and there used to be 4 supervisors plus a cleaning super. And now there's 3, and the cleaning super is wherever the ASP is that day. And then they rotate the other super to where that person was the day before. So they have said headcount would help. All right. DEP, DSNY. Now, if we have anything new or any big changes in this category.
Curious to see how City of Yes for Housing Opportunity shifts the views on these various issues.
I think that's why the word affordable is in bold. Is
For
it in
me,
bold? Yeah.
Mhm.
happy to see it.
Mhm.
The love for the bids. Like one person.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be interesting to see how the bids respond to this new unfunded mandate that they containerize everybody else's litter. If that does stick,
Does Lauren say anything?
she's pretty distressed. I suggested that they just pull every single public litter basket so they don't have to take responsibility. She doesn't like that idea. But I think bid directors are meeting with it's the little bids, it's the mid-sized to little bids that can't do it. Times Square Alliance, they're cool with it. But it's my understanding that bid directors are meeting with the mayor.
Thank you.
And, we'll see if they can even run. But it also goes back to what we were saying earlier, Carl. I mean, I think, the economic development and, what's going to happen to storefronts that were doing a lively business as unpermitted cannabis, outlets, if they're going to remain empty, is there a service to replace that? Other businesses expanding, pop-ups, that sort of thing.
Happy to see Newkirk Plaza plays strongly in there.
So.
Yeah. I,
You said there's no progress on
well, yes, I mean,
it? Walk through.
I was told that it's in legal and it's just a matter of drawing the contract between DOT and transit and that everybody is for it and, I was gonna reach out to the people who've been telling me that it's going to happen soon. It's the other word, Eric, imminently.
Soon.
And,
Very
you know,
expensive definition.
yeah, I mean, you can't say imminently in April and then have us asking a follow-up question about it again in September. Because unless I need to refresh my, and I'll look it up in the dictionary before. I
Soon
use
was
that.
July.
Yeah.
Theologically.
Imminent is like it almost, imminent means it almost already happened.
Imminent is fine. Yeah, that'd be great if you can get an update.
Look, I am Charlie Brown and I will kick that football again.
Yeah.
It does feel close.
It's close, yeah. So, all right, but yeah, we're gonna keep that. I actually, I'll get it up and show and help later. The last letter that we sent over to the, to transit and DOT was this thick.
Love it.
So I was gonna send it again, like, in case you forgot. But yes, that will be a pedestrian plaza someday.
And increase public open space. It was a strong showing, another 30%. Were we still 59 out of 59 or?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay,
mean,
just checking.
have you seen any new parks?
Just checking. Thought someone else might have.
Somebody lost a park.
Somebody else might have.
Oh, root for that. Okay, yeah, there's nothing. We'll keep beating those drums. Does that bring us to transportation? So, this kind of wasn't fair, this survey, because what it didn't have in these questions, because I pulled them from DCP's platform, it didn't have enough about bikes.
Yeah.
And so in that category of other, all of the others were some manifestation of wishes for bike lanes, protected bike lanes, bike lane networks, bike corrals, city bike sharing program expansion. So heard, bikes will be, it's already in the narrative, but we will make sure we have budget priorities that reflect this community's request for that. And hopefully we have an upcoming transportation committee meeting October, late October, to get an update from our June 2023 meeting. So that isn't reflected there. Everything else makes perfect sense for, I think, what we all see on our streets all the time and what we hear in this office.
You go and then I'll go. Okay. Well, two things, but to improve mass transit ridership, like, whose responsibility is that?
Transit, MTA, New York City Transit. And we do have we do not have a budget consultation with them, but they are in DCP's list of priorities, so we can make transit requests. The response we get back from transit for every request we've ever submitted is call your liaison to discuss. So they're really not participating in this process, and I've made an argument that maybe they should be taken out of that platform. But until they take it out of the platform, I think we would look like we're ignoring, like if it's there, we should be addressing it. But that's who's responsible for it.
And I wanted to ask about when you're making the left turn, the yellow flashing lights, like, so, however, because when traffic's going, folks are not slowing down, so you can make that left turn. Right? The folks are doing.
Yeah, no,
One in Caton.
yeah, there's also the Cortel Yukon intersection.
Yes, but I think they said we're changing that one, didn't they? They said there'll be no more.
Well, they're just gonna ban the turn and you don't need an arrow.
The only good reason I can think of for it is just to be alert for pedestrians crossing, but
It's
everyone driving should know that.
Yeah. One's not.
Yeah, no, I-
The bet.
Folks are not considered.
Yeah, I think those only work when you have the two lanes and one is for specific for turning and one is to continue straight.
Yeah.
Outside of that, you're still gonna wait in the line of cars.
Let's go to another state, they're more considerate.
So I have two recommendations. One, I've noticed that now we have, bus dedicated signals. I'd like to see that expanded. Especially if it's not widespread on Church Avenue, it should be, to get that B35, make that bus lane move, let's get it. And then the other thing is, what's the name of the parking space that's supposed to be for loading and unloading of trucks and vehicles? What is it called? Community parking, or they're gonna put one on Lennox Road, we discussed.
Mhm. I know what you're talking about. I don't know what their names, but it's just commercial loading, commercial.
We need more of those between the hours of like 8 AM to like 6 PM so that we don't have Amazon parking in front of hydrants and in driveways and things like that. And, it's during the day. People have already left for work and that restriction will be over, but we need more of that.
Neighborhood loads.
Neighborhood loading zone, thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks.
And those are like in residential areas, not the commercial areas?
They're residential areas. It's the equivalent of like 2 parking spaces. And so like,
I've never seen one.
Yeah.
and people, and you could use them if you're unloading or loading your car. It's not just
Not,
relegated.
it's just not a parking spot right there.
That's right.
So just to clarify, if you're saying it's in residential areas, so you're removing parking spots.
Right.
So there are a lot of those, is that equivalent, like something in Manhattan, where they have a ton of commercial loading zones?
No, it's neighborhood, commercial loading zone in Manhattan would only be commercial vehicles. Neighborhood loading zones can be used by people in the neighborhood. So if you have a big Costco order and you just came back from PJ's, you can park there, you can unload, and then you have to move your car. And
But it's also where the Amazon truck goes.
right.
Where your neighbor.
So rather than Amazon double
Your
parks and screw up traffic patterns for both buses and school buses and all the things, they have these areas where commercial and residents can park on them.
Gotcha, but if I need a doctor's appointment in that area, or I need a shop in that area, I have less parking spots.
It's on a residential street though. So it would be on like
But like in.
East 26 between O and Kings Highway. Easy.
Like, if we're talking about downtown Brooklyn, where where parking is almost.
Well, I'm not talking about downtown Brooklyn because I only talk about CB14.
No, let's say we're talking about an area where, within CB14.
Yeah.
Residential areas where parking is already a disaster. We're making it harder for people to travel by car. That's what we're really doing here, right?
Well, I think, so the argument against that could happen, but the argument against that is that, no, you're making it easier to travel by car because you now don't have an Amazon truck that's double parked blocking your safe passage through the street. You're making it harder to park in that residential area for those daytime hours, but arguably, there's less competition for parking on a residential street during business hours.
What areas and would we be considering for that?
They've just been doing it at their own pace and wherever they've identified the need. So we have one on the corner of, it's not in this district, it's just over the yellow line, but on the corner of Bedford and Linden. And now there's going to be a new one on Lennox between Flatbush and Bedford. So they've been
There's one on
identifying,
East 7th between Church and Caton.
yeah, so they've
There's
been,
still like major areas where like, the reason I was asking, because I'm thinking, I don't know when I'm thinking about my neighborhood and I'm like, where would that work?
What is your block?
I'm on 17 between Beverly and Albemarle.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
right off the Q train, yeah.
there isn't one there? I thought there was one on.
Unless I'm not reading the parking signs.
you may not have noticed because it's, most of the time people don't people park their cars there anyway.
Or you would think like the Amazon truck just found a parking spot,
Right.
but then if you look closer, there might be a sign saying Amazon, this is your spot.
It has like a
I'm gonna pay
blue,
attention a little more.
yeah, like
Yeah.
a blue flag.
I can actually get you a list of where they are in
Yeah.
the district because DOT has provided those to us. And also, just to your point, too, and there is an opportunity, they do provide it to the community board and they're like, are there any, are there any objections? And I think one time there was an objection to one on Avenue N. But most of the time, when I reach out to stakeholders in the area, I don't get any negative feedback. They're pretty. Okay, so more of that. And Joan, I was trying to think of something creative like infrastructure to prohibit 53-foot trucks from moving through our community with such ease, that.
I mean, the
More
environment itself in terms of trying to make a right-hand turn, on a lot of our streets should be the prohibitive factor, but it isn't.
Mhm.
And so there's property damage, or they knock down signs or whatever. It's a length issue. So, I mean, they would have to put some kind of sensor on the road and automatically ticket by length.
Like the day the truck turned on, Church Avenue from E60, and just scraped people's cars.
Oh, yeah. I have a really great video of a truck making a right-hand turn and
That is great.
decimated it, just ripped all the tires off of it. I'll send it to you on my YouTube. There's some cursing.
We're running a little bit later than I had anticipated, so just moving along to parks. Also another community facilities, those are some even looking bars.
That's kind of stuff. You know.
But yeah, look, it's a lot of love for the libraries, right? It's a lot of love for parks and libraries. It's add some parks and rehab the parks we have. And specifically, there's a request to go back to the park and the parade ground that we've never gotten any rehab at the top lot, top lot over on Campus Road. So we'll keep those up as priorities.
But something I saw the other day, when it rained, really, I think it was like flash. And parents were caught in the park that's across from the library on Argyle. And like, people were underneath the trees, but there was lightning, not in the area, but there were. And so parents and their children were huddling underneath the tree and underneath the sliding thingy, like crouched. So I was wondering, could we advocate for some kind of a shelter just in case, like something along the wall, just in case it ever happens, so that they're not standing underneath the tree. That tree that's in.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I can look for like any shelter in the park from sun and rain and maybe some storm safety PSAs.
It's just
Um,
so sad.
And then the other thing I was gonna add is forestry, tree pruning, the response time, the tree pruning cycle's gotten long where, yeah. I'm crestfallen every time somebody calls with a hanging branch and it's not even, it's really Patricia and Sarah who take the calls and have to explain to people. Sorry, they took a look at the picture and decided it's not an emergency, they're not gonna get to it for a year. It's not a good schedule.
For number 6, the community garden at the Flatbush Branch, that community garden was completed.
Yep,
So maybe it's provide funding
Yes.
for maintenance.
yeah, okay.
I'm curious what the maintenance looks like where Florencia is talking about when they redid the top lot, which is not that long ago, they planted a whole bunch of bushes and nice things and, that restricted like 5 feet from the wall, right? To get to those trees, you have to scale the little iron fence and go into the planting area where there are no plants left, right? It's dirt, it's dust. And my kids are digging in this, lead, who knows? But it would be really nice if the plantings were there. And the bushes that they had they weren't watered and then there's no mulch. I don't know. It's a waste of 5 feet in the playground. Like if they're not gonna maintain them, remove the rails. Put some benches along the wall.
That's what has to happen. There has to be a community group that goes in and waters.
They don't, at some point on the parks call with the guys, they said that they came and would do it if it was completely decimated, they would come
Which one?
and do it.
I'll find out.
Don't maintain.
Partnering group.
This was the question we had about Uma Park, because when we all would looked at the plans for all the foliage, we were like, oh, okay, that's awesome. Who's gonna water it? Now, somebody is doing it at Winthrop Park in CB9. But it doesn't happen everywhere. So the best course of action, if you want plants there, then you have to have a little friends of tot lot group that comes in and you rotate and you water.
Yeah. But I'll see what they can do in the meantime, and it's nice if you have that, but we shouldn't have to have that, because if you have to have it, it should be in place before you decide that that's what you're gonna do with the space. So I'll, do you have something?
Yeah, I'm still looking for a running track at Parade Ground.
Yeah.
Field number 3, right behind the tennis court. That one is hardly used.
You know, that should also be a, we'll put it in the regular budget, request, but, that sounds like an excellent candidate for a participatory budgeting, project request, so I'll put that in with Rita too.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Yeah, just quickly, just bouncing off the maintenance, issue comment before. If it's something that's not practical, that's probably not gonna happen unless something's actually done, there's a community movement. Maybe it's more worthwhile to, instead of talking about maintenance, just divert funding to something else here, like increasing pruning, which is just a disaster, as you correctly said.
Okay, I'll field the question to Parks in that way, that if instead of throwing money at something that isn't going to be maintained, repurpose it, and then use that funding for services.
I'm just gonna throw it, I know at the Flatbush Branch, there is an active gardening group that does care for the garden that is there.
Seems like Garfield Road's going to be hard to during the winter.
I can't imagine there
But-
are enough people there who love the opportunity.
But we'll talk to partnerships for it. The partnerships, what is,
It was the restoration, New York Restoration Group, Bette Midler's group that did the Flatbush Library.
okay. But there's also partnership with Parks.
Parks, yes. Well, partnership with Parks is going to allow community groups to form as a friends of, and you sign all your MOUs, and then you could work the space. So if anybody ever came to you, and that would be the route for that. But otherwise, then maybe having Parks engage with NYR.
Good. Is that it? That's the last one? Yes. But you all have an executive committee.
But was that it?
That's the last slide?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, just quickly, is there anything that wasn't on this list that has been like you? Anybody want a pony? There was the sprout. Okay, thank you very much for weaving through this with me.
Awesome. And so, boom, that concludes our.
I'm gonna shift over and give you the entirety of it.
I'm fine. So, yeah, so that concludes our public hearing at 7:33 PM on the capital budget. So we're gonna go right into the executive committee meeting. And so the first item, we have 3 high-level things. There's board meeting and hearing practices, and then we have committee meeting practices, and then there's board member responsibilities. And so for the first piece,
Before you continue, there's only specific members that are here for the executive.
No.
Anybody?
it's open. It's open then.
Oh.
You too.
Yeah, it's open.
I was ready to gather my belongings now.
So,
Yeah, I mean, all committee meetings are open to all board members and all members of the public, all the time.
I thought
Take
this-
that opportunity.
simple. Good thing that also didn't go. But it's open, yeah, so like, it's exactly like Sean said, yeah, they're open to all board members, right?
It's a matter of law, but I'm taking this as a note too, because there were a couple other inquiries about it, so I will, anything that's not just a regular committee, or maybe we'll just put it at the top of our agendas, like open to all board members and public.
Yeah.
We'll make it clear.
So then, for this first part of the board meeting and hearing practices, basically, what I'm gonna share with the group, right, is there's a bunch of hearings related to specific areas and we operate in certain ways. And so it's basically just getting confirmation from my fellow board members. For each of these areas, would you be fine with operating this year the same way we did for that particular item last year? Or would you have any questions, comments, concerns about that? And so there's a long list of things, so I'm just gonna go down the list basically. So the first one, for example, is the Office of Cannabis Management, right? And so there was a process that we followed last year in terms of receiving the notice from the state and then scheduling a public hearing. And then I just want to remind folks that towards the end of our board calendar year in June, we did receive 2 applications, but because we had received them at a time that would have been outside of our calendar year, we ended up not having like a public hearing for those, right? And so the question I have for the board members here is for this upcoming calendar board year, are people fine with the board keeping the same process this year for hearing any Office of Cannabis Management applications? This year, the same way we did it last year, or are there any questions or concerns about us following the same process this year as we did last year? Steve?
Yeah, I guess, you know, my main issue with it was like the lack of vetting on the front end before the application came us. Because there were definitely 1 or 2 or 3 applications that we spent time on. We'd have the meeting, the regular board meeting, we'd have a public hearing. And like, there wasn't that front end vetting, like when they proposed location too close to the school. And it's like, why are we all, wasting our time, for that? So if that continues to be a problem, like at least in my mind, I'm more open to the idea of, like, because I certainly trust the staff, I feel like, other boards, do have that process for liquor licenses. And it seems like, we let the board office handle that, and that's been the practice. So, that I could see the same logic applying to cannabis, but.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you for your feedback, board member Brown.
So what Steve is describing is, I would say, a deficiency in the way the state runs the process of applications, because the applicant has to self-certify when they come to us, but nothing has been done with the state, right? So the onus is on us, especially, and appreciate there are people that live close in the community to say that just doesn't feel right. So the onus is on us to look at that application with scrutiny, especially with distances, et cetera. And then actually knowing, what that store was used for before, because we've seen that often. So that's a deficiency with the state. We can't change that. So I think that in some respects, it's going to wind up becoming an issue for the office, because the office is then going to have to do the due diligence on some of those items if it becomes administrative. I'm going to say that because cannabis, we've had all of these illegal shops, and I think it's a very tender spot for people in our community right now until they really feel like things have changed, that I think we should continue to be publicly transparent with public hearings, at least for this year, and then see how things look next year and see how the public is viewing their security, and the activity that is being done in enforcement to close. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your comments. So are there any other questions left or comments regarding the OCM process?
Yeah, if I can chime in, I think, to both of those points is that it's still new, that we didn't, in the time that I did do the administrative one, because we didn't have time to hear it, we were breaking for summer and all of that. That application fit very squarely into a precedent that had been set. So I agree that it's still new and I agree that it's still more sensitive, but I also would think that there aren't that many. I don't think there are going to be that many so it's not going to be onerous the way SLA and change in SLA might be. But I think we should be mindful of for the upcoming public hearings, to the extent that we are setting a precedent with any of these decisions, maybe be mindful about articulating that, getting into the record. So if it does shift to an administrative task, that's really sort of in stone, those criteria that either are met or not met to come to a decision. Also, SLAs are almost like 100% yes. Those are, I wouldn't say they're rubber stamped because they're considered and thought about. But the OCM ones have been back and forth with yeses and nos.
Thank you very much. Okay. So then next up is the SLA State Liquor Authority. And so basically the way we do it now is very much administrative. And so if you want to give folks a little more insight into what that looks like, and then, yeah, we just ask folks, do we keep it administrative or is there anything that we change about them?
Yeah, we just get an application for on premises, restaurant bar. We review it, we share it with the precinct, we determine whether there have been any issues or concerns related to that location. Typically there are not, and so then we don't comment. We don't say we approve it, or if we have concerns, we do call their lawyer or the landlord. But mostly we just don't make a comment on it so that it kind of moves through the system. You have 30 days to hold a hearing, and that's the other thing. It's like 30 days. It's kind of quick to schedule a hearing and then get it ratified by the board and all of that. But we just let the 30-day notice pass as long as there hasn't been any issue raised. There are a couple locations in the district right now that have become a little kind of a problem spot. And so when the board has always said that the district manager can request that the board hold a public hearing on any problem spots, and I'm just going to reserve the ability to do that. And maybe we'll call on the board this upcoming year just to make sure that the people who have concerns about locations have an opportunity to vet them. And then it also gives me a platform upon which to require a stipulation on their license, which would be closing earlier or limiting outdoor service or something like that. You can say something.
No, you asked more questions.
Considering the city of Yes economic development, we're gonna see a lot of changes in what that's gonna look like. So please do call on the board if you feel like this is something new, something you've never seen before, and is a result of economic development.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe with brand new applications that are not in places where a place of business, a similar place of business was, could be absent. But, if it's a change in use in a location, that might be a good trigger for starting to open up some things a little bit. Especially since I was very uncomfortable with that zoning text amendment, and then the board supported it, so I felt a little bit out on a limb. And so I'll I don't have the full faith support of the board on some of those things. I think bringing it into public process would be easier, or yes, easier.
Okay. Thank you. And so the next up is open dining. And so basically with open dining, when we receive an application from DOT, then same thing, we have to hold basically a public hearing within a 30-day window. We also had a similar situation at the end of our board calendar year in June, where we had received the application from the Costello plan, but because we wouldn't have time to have a hearing within that 30-day window, we basically we got the board approval per vote to basically just take no action. And so after an expiration of 30 days, then basically it was on to DOT, right? And so same question, would we just do the same thing where if we do get, whenever we do get one, we basically hold the public hearing within that 30-day window? Or do we think we should shift it to be purely administrative, like the SLA thing is, or something different?
I think I think you should hear those.
I think so too.
They're new, restaurants can be touchy, and the thing about the Costello plan is it was so benign. It was two little chairs up against the wall. It was so benign that and I just knew that they were gonna behave well, and there were no complaints about that, so benign. But if it had been, a couple places I can think of across the street, I would not have been comfortable doing that administratively. So it's a brand new program. It's a brand new thing. I think you should hear them. We're not gonna get, we're not gonna get flooded like they are in some districts.
Good. All right, cool. Seeing nothing from anyone else, so then, land use. Do folks have any?
Let's not hear those.
You would love that. That's not gonna happen. So yeah, so basically, any questions, comments, concerns about following the same process for land use public hearings this year as we did last year? Joanne?
I think if we are going to have committee meetings remote, then we do have to hear land use items as a public hearing in person.
So say that again, so if we're gonna do.
So if we're going to have remote committee meetings, then we should have land use applications be by public hearing in person.
Yeah,
That asks for the why, so.
Because we can only come to consensus in committee. We can't make a true recommendation to the board. And that was the thinking when we decided to continue committee meetings to be remote to have more engagement. But anything that required like
Board action,
we would do it in person.
yeah, and to kind of change the order a little bit, just because that's a perfect segue. And so at the end of June, had a meeting with the legal committee because I did have the question of, given some conversation around the latest budget that was adopted in open meetings law, would we operate the same way or not, right? And so basically, the thinking came that as of this moment, yes, like we will operate this year the same way we did last year, where the general board meetings that happen once a month will meet in person. And including the public hearings, those will be in person. And then the committee meetings, those will stay virtual. And it's exactly to that point where the way that we operate so far is that the board meetings and the public hearings are the ones where we're basically discussing and taking action, right? Whereas in the committees, like we are listening and maybe discussing things that would then be taken before the board for the board to take action on. But the way we are operating, we are not actually taking action within the committees.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, just wanted clarity.
Yeah. Sure, no problems.
Martin, this is sort of new language for you. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, following along so far.
Okay.
So now we're on to landmarks and preservation. How many did we have? I know there was that one with that architect and that family with that house.
Well, I mean.
That was a
you know,
public hearing as well, though.
So what we say to the people, to applicants to LPC is that, we only hold public hearings upon the request of the neighborhood association in which the application is being submitted. And then they have to make sure that the neighborhood association executive folks or committee chairs or presidents are advised. And then we never get that request. They're usually, they're fine with the application, the neighbors. And in fact, the one time we had the one for the Albemarle Road house, it was a misunderstanding of the language. It was like, we only do this at the request of the neighborhood association. They're like, oh, the request has to come from you instead of like, so something got lost in translation, but it was fun. I didn't mind it. But there is the question about, and I think again, depending on what happens with City of Yes for housing opportunity and the extent to which there may be ADUs and other things going in the landmarked neighborhoods, some of these LPC applications might not be so. Yeah, so that's kind of why I raised it as a question is, as far as how many applications we get a year. See a 3, maybe when, interest rates go down, it could go up a little bit.
I have a question, Carl.
Yes,
Well, not a question.
Yes.
Again, related to City of Yes.
Yes.
I know that, one, if not two neighborhoods in Victoria and Brooklyn are even more ignited to get their LPC, designation. So I would say if we don't hear the smaller ones, we should definitely reserve room to hear full swaths of the neighborhood, because
We always have. I think the distinction here is individual applications
okay,
versus community applications.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the consensus is we would do the same thing last year, where it's like, yes, we would have a public hearing. But it would basically be, I guess, like you said, the nuance was whether it was the applicant or the neighbors
We
association.
do one at the request of the applicant or their neighborhood association.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Got it. So next up, we have DCP. Right, and so, are there any questions or comments or concerns with us, following the same process we did last year? With DCP?
Department of City Planning, that would be zoning text amendments
Yep.
and stuff like that.
Yep.
So what are we in, I mean, obviously, last
Maybe
year was
there
a very
won't
big
be.
year for that, but
I mean,
It's not gonna be any more special permits,
if it'll.
or a few.
okay.
But yeah, they have to be publicly heard. Anyway, I think ULIP applications actually by directive of the charter have to go through public hearing. I mean, it's sort of a controversy happening in Southern right now. With the Arrowing and stuff, so I think that's a no-brainer.
Okay, cool. So then I think that covers that piece for the acronyms. So I thank folks for their patience. So then the other thing I want to bring up to folks was during the June board meeting, I did mention that I had stated that there was a minority report ask that had come from the June 11th board meeting, and in the chair's report in that June meeting, I said that I was saying no to that ask because I felt that the June 11th board meeting and also our June board meeting provided a window and space for board members' comments to be heard and to also be considered within the recommendations. And so I'm bringing it up here because I did also say that this space would be a place to talk about it. And so I've definitely done a bunch of thinking about it over the summer, and after much thought, I still feel that way. I still feel that a minority report isn't necessary because I do believe that for this board and the way that we operate, I do believe that in our committees and in our general board meetings, we do provide space for the board members' viewpoints to be heard, and that we are considering, like, yes, at the end of the day, a vote has to be made, but I do feel like we are considering those viewpoints in the conversation that has to be done in order to arrive at a motion that's ultimately voted on. And so that's why I feel like a minority report isn't necessary. And so I wanted to share my thoughts on that. My question for folks is, do folks have any questions or comments or concerns regarding what I just shared? Yes.
How would a minority report work? I mean, I know the concept, but I'm just curious about how that would actually be manifested in community board.
Sure. So like procedurally, like how would that work?
Mhm.
Got you. So give me a second real quick because I have my notes here. So basically, what would happen is, and I'm gonna make sure I got this right. Yes. Okay. So I have it. Yeah. So basically the idea about I'm really cliff noting this, but basically the idea behind the minority report, per Robert's Rules of Order, is that when the body has come to a decision, if there is a member who feels so strongly against that decision that was arrived at, that this person feels like another decision, another basically statement has to be given to explicitly say out loud what they disagreed with, right? So that's what the minority report is. And so what would happen then is, as chair, my job would be, I would have to make a motion to see if anybody objected to the minority report being read, right? If no one objected, then that individual would be able to read their minority report. If the person did object, then it would have to come to a non-debatable vote. And what that would mean is a majority of the board would have to vote in favor of that minority report being heard in order for that report to be delivered. If it turned out a majority of the board voted against that minority report being heard, then that minority report wouldn't be heard, right? So I see Board Member Brown and then Parker.
I'm gonna say, based on parliamentary procedure, that if the majority of the board voted one way and a minority has a different perspective, and then you have to vote to hear the minority report, it's moot. So, because then the majority who is voting for the majority is gonna vote down the minority report. So it's kind of like, why bother? Why go through all of that then?
And then I see Board Member Parker and then.
You could circle back to me. I'm still pondering.
Okay. So,
So I also think, and one of the things I mentioned to Carl is, all of our meetings are recorded and those recordings are on our website. And so that minority opinion would have been articulated in the debate and it is already there as a matter of public record. So I think it's not, you said moot, I'm gonna say redundant.
No, I appreciate where you're coming from. That's a thing that they didn't have when they wrote Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah.
But you know, to have the board vote on an issue, on a minority issue where the majority disagreed with that and voted it down anyway, it's like, we're gonna spend time doing something that's not gonna pass anyway. Like, the report's not gonna pass anyway, so I think your decision is correct.
Can I add one more thing?
yes.
Like, also, we kind of took a survey among some peers and minority reports. I haven't found a board that does them. It doesn't mean that we can't, because we could be different, but it isn't the norm.
And Arnella, do you have?
I'll circle back.
Okay, no problem. You let us know.
Ruminate.
I got you.
Yeah.
So did we answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Excellent. So then now this goes to the committee meeting practices part. I think this part will be pretty short. So it's just for folks who are committee chairs, I thank you for doing so, just because it does take a lot of time and effort and energy on top of all the other stuff you do. So thank you for doing that. And then just a friendly reminder to just check your emails as you work with the district office to plan your stuff. And then what I do love is the meetings that I went to last year. Everybody was trying to come up with like engaging ways to, basically get committee members who normally don't speak up to try and speak up, right? And so I love that. And I definitely implore committee chairs to do that. And also, committee members who aren't chairs, I implore you as well to, try and find ways to get your fellow committee members who, everyone's thoughtful, but some people feel more comfortable sharing their thought on this out loud, and others kind of like to just really listen and process and then, say their thing out of moment. And so I implore everyone to keep that up. The other thing too, yes, what's up?
So something happened when we went remote,
Which is.
right? And it became, I'm on this board almost 10 years, right? It'll be 10 years next year. And when I came on this board, committee members always spoke first in committee, in person. And I'm just saying, that I'm gonna have a conversation with my co-chair about allowing our committee members to speak first and then hearing other voices. Because not only does that engage people who might not normally speak on our committee, but it also kind of like will filter some of the noise of the few voices that speak everywhere. And I think, at least in my committee, I'm going to open every conversation with this is committee member discussion only, and then open it to board members and then move on.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. So I see board member Cohen, yeah, so.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, and I was, one thought I had, you know, was like, especially when I was like co-chairing but still now, I can never keep straight like who's in my committee, like I always have to like go check it, and I think, you know, we don't really distinguish. In some ways, I think, you know, I think it could be argued both ways, because I feel like because we don't, you know, make a big deal about who's in what committee, and it's kind of just like we're all there, we're all participating, and I feel like it kind of encourages, you know, people to come to other committee meetings, because it's just like, yeah, we should be involved in all this, and we get good participation that way. But, you know, like I don't know if there's something about like, oh, you know, emphasizing who actually is in the committee versus not. Like I feel like it could be argued both ways. So I think it's an interesting topic to think about.
Sure, so. Yeah.
You inferred something that I'm gonna take as a suggestion. I mean, the co-chair should know who's on the committee, and I'm gonna make sure that when I'm reminding co-chairs that their committee meeting is coming up, I will say, and just as a friendly reminder, here's your committee members. I think maybe even I would suggest that co-chairs introduce or announce the committee members. Maybe it's a sort of passive attendance taking even. And then also people who are members of the public know, you know, who's on that committee. And I think that also kind of reinforces the importance of participating on your committee. And then I have no opinion about the order of speakers.
I'm, again, I'm not trying to influence how other co-chairs function, but a committee is a working group, right? And the lines have been blurred, and the lines were blurred because of remote working, right? So I think now it might be important to sort of try to figure out how are we going to work in this virtual environment in committee, right? Just the way that they do it in council and any other parliamentary body. So that's the way I'm thinking about it, especially to engage new people that are on a committee. You want them to feel like they are part of a group, a subgroup. And we always say committee members and interested board members. So it doesn't mean that interested board members can't have a say, but they shouldn't also not be the only driving voice in the conversation.
Got you. So then thought exercise would be if, you know, it's you, Eric, myself, and Sean, right? You two are in the committee, and then I'm just a member of the public at large, and then Sean's a board member. So then after the presentation is done, if Eric had a question, Eric would, I guess, share his question first. And then if Sean had a question, Sean would go first. She would go next. And then after that's done, you know, if I had a question, that's the way, okay.
Yes.
Okay. So then, thank you very much for sharing that feedback. I'm trying to think if there's any other things I wanted to, oh, yeah, point go ahead, sorry. Mr.
Sorry, I'm such a person. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, when I started going to the meetings, I remembered, I didn't really attend some of the other meetings that I wasn't a part of, right? I basically went to but when we went virtual, and I just attended all. However, something that, you know, I think we really should get to know the members that are in our committee, which I know, Yvette, that's all. Because, like, to be honest, I really don't.
Look, I tried a couple things. We tried to like seat you with your committees at the board meeting,
Yeah,
so you
that
do a little
is-
mixer beforehand. We can keep trying, like, everybody wants to come to the reception and maybe, you know, we can
That's
figure,
what I was.
we can
going
figure
to
out
do,
the more person.
that maybe at the reception, that we can really just.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'll also just send out, you know, look, it's on, we sent you all the list, it's on the website, but I'll be more proactive about pushing those names and, you know, maybe we can figure out a little.
Sean's better.
Mhm.
Right, Lorenzo, you have the the good fortune of just being a friendly person, but for like mean guys like Eric, it's hard sometimes.
If you're not in the AFC East, you don't want to.
No, we all have to work harder when when you're not meeting in person all the time, so we'll figure out ways to try to get over that.
That's true.
I'm gonna, just want to add something Joanna's making me think about, when you talked about first meeting, I think I joined right before the pandemic. I remember sitting down in the education meetings and Carl was the co-chair at the time. And you're right. I was like, I knew who the education people was. Because we came every time and I knew those people. And just, I'm a teacher and I taught, remotely. And it's terrible for relationship building, right? And I think Joanna, like the idea of like the working group, I just, it's hard to have a real working group. And especially if we're a community, we all live here, right? Like there's workspaces and people live in London and have to work with people in New York, that's that. But in a community, I mean, I personally am in favor of like having everything in person and like being able to have the hybrid projections where people can comment or watch or participate. But there is something to me that, I would argue in school, the things like relationships are built in person where a mute and the screen is not there. I actually would look forward to them returning in person.
I think.
Sorry, good.
I'm sorry.
No, you're going. Mute.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I was thinking that we can build that working relationship virtually as well. I know my cousin has a group and they're from all around the world. I kid you not, every single Friday, and folks show up to me. And you think about different time zones, but they show up and they make it work. And
So,
I think that it also gives us a chance, more of us a chance to attend. Right, Sean?
I'll put two suggestions out there. One is maybe co-chairs should ask their committee members to always have their cameras on because the name in a box is not a good way to get to know people. So maybe committee, like if you want to attend other people's committee, the rules don't necessarily have to apply, but committee members should always have their cameras on. The other thing I could offer for your consideration is, if there are co-chairs who would request that their committee meeting be in person here in the office, they can make that request to the office and we could consider doing that on an as needed or as requested basis. I think it's like planning for the youth conference is something that might, we do. That could be held in person more. So think about that, but then, and then we can talk about any requests that you make for an in-person committee meeting, because there's the ups and the downs and the participation might change. And I get, if we're having people from agencies come out to this little dead end by that little dead end in the dark in the winter, and 6 people show up, that gets a little painful for me.
Is there
Yeah, go ahead.
not an infrastructure to do a hybrid thing?
Ish. So even tonight, we had a panic before this began because our sound went out.
Uh-huh.
And then the sound came back and we didn't even press any buttons or do anything. We couldn't get a hold of Mark Moss. We couldn't fix it. He just texted me like about a half hour ago and said, I just turned it down and the sound is fine. Thanks, Johnny, on the spot. So, I hope he's still listening.
Like the new AC.
But
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, the one thing I was thinking, Christopher, is that if we had any city agency people, we brought them in hybrid, but we didn't have the public participation hybrid, that might be a sort of hybrid of a hybrid that could work. So it's all kind of experimentation and a work in progress, but we can keep trying different things.
I just think I end up traveling a lot for work and would prefer in person, but having that option to do both.
Yeah. You would, the way the open meetings law is written is that you would have to have a very substantial reason, and work is not a substantial reason. It would be childcare, elder care. There's a,
Meaning that it's more of like an all or nothing type.
If you were not able to make your committee meeting and you wanted to attend that meeting hybrid, there's voting, there's, sort of consensus voting issues. And then again, based on the way that it's written for the excuses of why you can do that, that's very limited.
That makes sense. I also kind of think about it in terms of if we had a hybrid space and the committee was here in person, maybe more people from the public, or like you were saying, the city agencies can come in, like just increasing the access to the space, if that's possible. And if it's not, then-
Yeah, it's getting possible. It's becoming possible, but it's nerve wracking because the technology is so spotty in this office.
So I saw Deborah.
Yeah, one thing I was gonna request that I noticed in a lot of the presentations online, when we have guests, the guests don't even come on camera. And I'm like, what kind of stuff is this? Cause, we supposed to get to know you when you're presenting to us. You should let us see who you are.
So when you're co-chairing your committee, you can.
I will.
Every-
I will.
That's
That's
We
what
can also
the
put that there.
I would talk about.
We can also put it in our invitation for them to present, like, yes, we've arranged for you to present, we've confirmed the day, we do have a rule that we can't enforce, but we do ask you to respect it, and that's what we can.
All right. Thank you.
Definitely, thank you. And I heard a few things here, right? Like, I think, if I distill this correctly, the stuff I heard here is about, finding a way to, I don't know if it's restructured, but finding a way to reinvigorate the purpose of what the committees are. And then also there's a deeper question of, how do we build stronger relationships, like between ourselves, right? Just because I think the argument is that the stronger the relationships are that we build between ourselves, then the stronger that reinvigoration of the intent of the committee could be. And so, a silly idea that popped in my head. I don't think we could do it for the board meeting on September, because that's on Monday. But a silly idea that popped in my head is some sort of random community board bingo-esque kind of thing.
Why can't we do it Monday? The reason I'm saying that is I think, especially for new members who are coming into this year, what you introduce people with is gonna set the stage for like the year. And I know for me, the groups that I always come back to is when I go for the very first meeting, how like the stage that was set. So I hear you on like, it's short notice, but is it a large ask to make that happen for Monday?
Reset the perception, right, on the 19th.
Maybe both. Maybe Monday's attendance can be fine. Say if you would have the patience for it, is for the first attendance of the year, when your name is called, please stand. Here, stand, wave to everybody so everybody can see who you are. Would that be a good first step that we can do like that?
That's possible. Like, what I was thinking too, in terms of like the committee bingo, is just because what we're talking about in terms of like the challenges of working with children, building these things. I mean, these are the things that icebreakers are supposed to like crack that first layer, right?
Yeah.
And so, and we're in an interesting situation where we're volunteers, Sean and Patricia and Sarah, they're paid, this is their full-time thing. So it's like, you have this group of people who do care. The responsibilities and the timeframes are vastly different. So it's like, what's an icebreaker that's playful and quick, but like little bit by little bit, you know, something quirky. So it's not, you're right, like from a technical standpoint, it's not hard to draw a grid. Actually, I should rephrase that, right? So it's not hard, because my hands work and I'm fortunate about that, right? It's not hard for me to draw a grid and then put in some random things about myself and other people that I've known over the years. The hard part is like, hey, this is the first time we're trying this here. And so, hey, when you sign in your name, pick this up and take a guess about which one of your fellow board members does this thing, right? And then, so that's the only reason why I say it's hard, because it would take me legit 45 seconds to draw that grid, tell Sean, and put it somewhere in my chair's report. But those 45 seconds could make it crash and burn, and then there's no way to build off of that stuff. So that's what I'm wrestling with, but I see you, that, yeah, what's up?
Yeah, that wasn't what I had in mind when you said community bingo. I actually thought we would have a piece of paper with bingo and
And fine.
everyone would have it, and then you would start, because that's an icebreaker that I actually do. I have a great.
That's cool
bingo,
too, that's another way of
and
doing it.
I have it and I start talking to different people and I write their names down related to, oh, you've lived in this neighborhood for over 20 years and.
You're on the education.
Yeah, so now I
committee.
get to know different people. That's what I thought. And I
That's
feel
cool
like
too, that's a
that's
great
something
idea.
we can-
That's a cool idea too, though.
That's, yeah, that's something we can.
Let's,
do for
let's,
reception.
let's talk more offline and get it.
Yeah, that's good for reception.
Okay, so we could do that then, so that's a.
Tom and Jaeger, we're gonna roast him, but this is maybe the.
Oh, no, I don't wanna push that off. Like- Minority report. Yeah.
Steve's like, man, I wanna eat and roast the guy, yeah. But what I do.
All right, all of the above, it'll be fun.
Sweet.
Okay,
So I'm trying to think if I had anything else for the committee meeting. I don't think so. So then, the last part that I have then is, and so the last part that I have is board members, oh, I remember, yes. And so friendly reminder that for the like per our bylaws, right? For you on your committee meets a minimum of 3 times during the calendar year, right? And so whatever committee you're on, you definitely have to attend your meetings, right? So of course, life happens, so if you can't, let people know, right? But at the bare minimum, whatever committee you're a member of, you definitely need to attend those meetings, and that committee is supposed to meet a minimum of 3 times a year. Like we say, the meetings are open, right? So outside of that, you cannot attend as many, other committee meetings as you want to, but just know that if you are on a committee, in addition to you attending the general board stuff, that's the minimum that's required of you for being on the committee, right? And then the last thing that I want to bring up too is board member responsibilities and stuff, right? So the reason I'm bringing this up is because there was a situation that arose over the summer where some folks reached out to the community board and they felt that some things had been published that may have been in violation of the bylaws or not, right? And so what I want to do is just be like very clear, and then what I'm being very clear about, I'm also going to say in the chair's report. So I'm specifically referencing, there's a bylaw, it's 3.b.e, and it says any appointed board member making a public statement, including social media, shall not claim to represent the board's position unless designated to do so by the chairperson of the executive committee, right? So what this basically means is, hey, cool, you could tweet, you can post, you can do TikTok, you can do whatever you want, right? But just know that you need to be explicitly clear that you are a member of Community Board 14 and you are doing this as an individual, right? Like, that's it. You make that clear and then people understand, okay, well, whatever comes next, I'm saying this as an individual. And the other reason why I say the CB14 thing in front is because that way people don't feel, for whatever reason, that you may have been disingenuous or stuff like that, right? So as long as you do that, per the bylaw, you're fine, because you have clearly stated that while you are a board member, what you were saying is in an individual capacity, right? Where things get dangerous and where things get murky is if you don't say that second part, because then there's another part of the bylaw, specifically sections 3, specifically 3.b.2 and 4, that do give the board the authority to basically remove a board member for cause. And one of the reasons for cause is attendance. Another one could be for violating additional provisions. And one of those additional provisions is that speaking on behalf of the board without me designating you to do so, right? And so I'm just saying that out loud, and I'm also going to say that in the chair's report on Monday. And so you can post. I'm not saying you can't post. Just know that if you are going to post, just make it clear that you are doing this as an individual, right? Because if there's a fuzzy line that, oh man, I know they're a board member, but I can't tell if they're speaking on behalf of the board or not, that's when things get murky. So.
Point of clarity around posting as an individual.
Mhm.
So I think we all have social media. Whenever I post, I don't state that I'm a community board 14 member unless it's something for community board, like the youth conference, right? Is it that we're operating as, unless you state that you are a community, you're representing community board 14, that you are posting as an individual? Or are you saying that we have to, every time we post as an individual, note that we're Yeah, because that's how it was started.
Yeah.
Gotcha, no. So what I mean is like, if you're commenting, so like, I'll give you an example. So an example is like, any of the 3 zoning text amendments that we just did, right? So I remember you had a question before during one of our, either a public hearing or the committee of the whole meeting, where you were asking about the timelines, right? Where it was like early July was the deadline for us to submit the community board recommendation. You as an individual had time after that to submit your own personal, comments and thoughts on that, right? And so that's a perfect example of if you had gone to the DCP testimony or something else, right? And you had testified or posted about the city of Yes, you would be fine unless you had said, hey, like, I'm on the board of CB14 and this is how they voted.
Right.
And da 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 da. Or if you had said, hey, like, I know that CB14 did this because of da 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 da, right? Then it's like,
No, that makes sense.
Right, on matters before the board, if you're posting about matters that are before the board or related to the community, like service delivery and stuff like that,
but like,
that's one thing.
yeah, but like,
If it's the chat about, if it's, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
like I'm not saying you got chopped cheese and you're like, hey,
No,
I'm
no,
CB14.
that's not what I thought.
Individual, this
I think-
chopped cheese was good, right? Like you don't got.
No, I get that. I think what clarity was because you stated that before all of those posts, you have to say, I'm a member of Community Board 14, but I'm posting as an individual. But it's like, as long as you don't state, I'm posting on behalf of Community Board 14, you're fine to post as an individual.
And it's, yeah, so you're right.
Right? Does that?
A little bit of nuance. So like you called out, I do need to be more specific because yes, it's about matters before the board,
Board.
right? Because right, the way that I said it before was like, if I look at that light and I say something, it's like I got, you know what I mean? So you're right. I do need to be clear about what I'm. So the first thing is, it's like if you're basically speaking about any matters before the board, right? Then you have to make it clear. And the reason, and this is my suggestion, ultimately, like, the part that I'm suggesting is saying, if you're gonna speak about something that is a board member, my suggestion is saying upfront that you are a Community Board 14 member. Just so that way, like, people understand, okay, cool, like, you have this role. The part that I am requiring of people is if they are gonna speak about something before the board, after that part, you make it clear, but I'm speaking in an individual capacity. Right? And it's just about matters before the board. Yeah, that's.
So I just want to be real clear
No,
here.
this is,
No,
this
it's
is
not
why,
hard to be.
this is why we're talking about.
They're
this,
murky
right?
areas for sure.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, if we go, for example, if I went to that testimony, that would, because that was a matter before the board, that.
Joel Siegel did that very well.
That-
He got up, he said, my name is Joel Siegel, I serve on Brooklyn Community Board 14, but I am here as an individual who resides in the blah, blah, blah neighborhood.
Correct. Exactly, right.
The word but is very important.
I remember when I was reading, initially when I joined, the language that stuck in my head is, you cannot represent yourself as a spokesperson for the community board, right? You are a citizen and you're a neighbor and whatever. If you're out there in the world, you don't represent yourself as representing the board in some capacity, speak somewhere or whatever.
Right.
But, it's okay that you are a member and you have your own opinion.
Because on the flip side of what gets confusing about it to me is, I mean, I'm not a board member on any community board, but it does seem like a little funny if you don't say it at all. If you're out there and you're making this testimony, I live in this neighborhood and this, and then it's discovered later that you're on the board, it looks like you were hiding it. So
So that's why I.
So I
that
think to
thing
be
is-
clear and say, I am on the board, but I'm not here as a board member, I'm here as a principal of a school or a resident in the area or a business owner on Cortelli Road or whatever it is you're
Yeah.
saying. I think a lot of transparency is always the better way.
I don't want to belabor the conversation, but I think one thing that trips me up a little bit is if someone from the board is trying to characterize like something that the board did or like an action that the board took, and like if there's like, if maybe like that statement there's quibbles with it or whatever, like it just something feels weird about someone just like saying like, okay, the board did X, and then you kind of put yourself in a position where if you're not 100% right, you kind of getting kind of close to that line of, representing the board, but not really. So
I
that's.
get a little uncomfortable when board members will, and it's not like you can't do this, but it's I look closely when a board member is out there saying, I can't believe the Department of Transportation can't da, 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 da. And if, if I see that from a board member, I usually reach out and say like, how can we help? Like, we're here and this is what we do, but, there's you're representing the community to the board and the board to the community, and I'm representing the board to the community and then the board to the city agencies. And so, yeah, I mean, if you have to wonder whether or not you can say it as an individual, I mean, if you have to wonder, stop and wonder, I guess.
And I hear you, like with that nuance, yes, right? Just because this is the kind of thing too, where, this is the kind of thing where I can see that nuance because it's like, yes, objectively speaking, you were just reporting what was done, right? And then the challenge with that is, not even the challenge, but the situation is just that given the bylaw that we have and the language that it was there, right? The issue here from a bylaw perspective is not about like the truth and the accuracy of what you reported, right? It's that it is possible for someone to interpret it as you speaking on behalf of the decision that was made, as opposed to someone understanding, oh, like 100%, this is just the restatement of what was done and this person is speaking in their own capacity, right? So like that's, so I get it. So that was the last piece. Oh yeah, what's up?
I didn't want to interrupt if you were
No,
going.
go ahead. Yeah.
But it was fresh in my mind just because all this committee stuff. I just wanted to raise, especially also because the bylaws reference made me think of this.
Yes.
There's the issue that probably certainly a lot of members of the public aren't aware of, and maybe there might be board members not aware of it either, but the opportunity for members of the public to join committees. I don't know if we publicize that as much as we should. And there have been some instances of it over the years. It's not regularly done, but especially given with term limits coming up, it seems like a good way, for people who are interested in potentially applying to the board, who especially might be interested in certain types of committees, that sort of thing.
You see it as a recruitment vehicle kind of?
I mean, it could,
I think maybe, let's talk about it a little more, Carl, and think about it a little more, but maybe when you introduce, like in the agenda, when we're turning to topical committee reports, just a friendly reminder, members of the public can join committees as public members of those committees. Martin, did you hear that?
Assuming those for my presence.
We say it a lot in this office with the people who come in a lot and bring us, our trusted messengers from the community. We all often, try to get them involved in that way. But, you've got daytime community people and you've got nighttime community people, and they're always the same folk.
And what I'm wondering too with that idea too is, I know Joanne had to leave, but Renella and Joanne are the co-chairs of our transition committee. Yeah, so that's an interesting idea that's an interesting thread to pull and stuff like that, right? So thank you for that. Appreciate that. Right. So folks, I mean, unless there are any other questions or comments, that is it for today's executive committee meeting. And so that concludes at 8:27 p.m. So if you're an NFL fan, good luck. He's gonna be crossing his fingers and toes all game on Monday.
I got the Villanova Knicks. I don't got where.
That's your escape mechanism. That's your escape mechanism. One of my best friends, he's a 49ers fan. He and his wife had their first kid recently. So he's a hilarious hater. And so he said, he's like, I hope the 49ers so I can teach you how to properly.
Good.
I'm like, I know you're a pro hater. I know you're because of it. Jeez.
Transfer to the next.
Yo.
It's nice to meet you, see.
He was a UCSD guy, Bay Area through and through, and so it's like, so he had the second. It's 5 years. Just pregnant. His daughter, he's like, look at her, he's at this one time. He's like, what do you think of? You guys get down to that.
Actually, my nephew, my sister,
And then
my nephew So we didn't go down, but.
We're.
Traveling.
Okay.
So under, it's like the first tab and you drop it down.
It's good, but I'm excited for this.
Language for members of public.
I was gonna say, it's my first day.
Yeah.
No.
It's not, it's just a sentence.
Smart to figure out that.
Was he riding the bike or was he?
We drove on Thursday. Okay. So we're like, yeah, they literally told us, they're like, no, let the buses figure it out. I was like, okay.
But you have to just.
So my daughter is.
We put it harder to become.
Yours, yeah, Freddie. But then I got my middle man is
Okay.
school next week.
You have to.
That happens.
You have to come sit in front of them.
Okay.
It's not a high bar. You have to go to a meeting. Say we'd like to.
It's a-
Okay, all right, you'll hear from me, probably by third.
Looking forward to here, then. A lot of work. It'll be fun.
It was.
Some friends of mine got to see.
That in it, and then.
I saw your message, Friday 13 words, I'll get back.
Anytime.
Friday the 13th.
And I, on the side of the person, but what time of work is it?
Sorry.
I'm gonna just be after. Quick chat. See you.
Just writing the number out like 6 times.
I'm probably gonna send a welcome.
Night.
Great. No, I love it.
Which one? I'll send you the draft that makes sense.
That sounds great. I love that. So where's your?
Oh, dude.
You went to Paris?
Yeah, man. I did a thing I normally don't do. I did a big vacation for myself because I have a friend of mine and she's like huge on logistics and things. See you later, Florencia. So basically what happened was because she had done the Olympics before, she knew that about a year and a half, 2 years before the Olympics start, that's when the lottery period opens up. And so about a year and a half, 2 years ago, she started looking at tickets, man.
No way.
And yeah, and then basically she's a logistics guru, so she won some lottery tickets, figured it all out. And so there were 4 of us who went, and so
Did you get to see?
we got to see beach volleyball,
Sweet.
which was awesome. We saw men's soccer, so that was awesome. We got to see some swimming, which was awesome, and we also got to see women's rugby. Awesome.
You were at that game?
So no, we saw no. So what we saw,
The walk off,
No.
that was like probably the best thing I saw.
my guy,
Of all the
my
Olympics,
dude, we missed that because when we were there like the last week of July, and so the women's rugby matches that we saw the first 2 matches of group play, right? Because the way they did it was every group, like every team in a group, they had their first 2 matches of group play,
Yeah.
and then the next day they played their last one, and then they basically went like right into like the winners and all that other stuff. And so the tickets that we had, we didn't catch that
You
much.
saw the rise. You saw the rise.
My man, it was
So you were probably fine. Did you watch that match? Because you were there, you were probably following it.
because we were in another
Oh.
game. We were in another game.
Yeah, too many tickets.
It was crazy.
That's like that watching it, because we tuned in a lot, but like, it's like.
You too as well. You too as well.
It's like, how do you?
Event bingo cream. Bingo cream.
Yeah. A lot. With teenagers, that's right for this.
It works.
Good night, John and.
Yeah, Sean, do you need us to turn on any lights, close any things, or? Yeah, Sean, you need us to turn off any lights, close anything? Cool beans, cool beans.
Talk to you tomorrow.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. Right, we have all, oh yeah, September. Busy. She's doing all this thing. But yeah, it was, we saw, the funny thing was, matches that we saw, so, you know, got to see West play, of course, saw Canada,